What's up guys, and welcome back to the Bonsai-En YouTube channel. I'm Josh, and today I'm going to be teaching you something you're definitely going to want to avoid if you're trying to develop black pine bonsai, so stick around. Alright, so what I have here is a Kotobuki black pine. But what I'm about to teach you will pretty much go across the board for all your black pine species. So your Yatsubusa, your just normal cultivar of black pine, your Nishiki, and everything like that. And this will probably even apply to red pine. But personally, I haven't worked with a lot of red pine since I've been into bonsai. So I would just check on that one. But what I'm about to show you is definitely a technique that you can use on Japanese black pine. So what we've got here is a tree that's in development. So this is pretty standard for, something that you probably see at a nursery, very raw stock. It's not even pre-bonsai yet. This would be just something that you would buy to work on yourself. Now, I always see a mistake when people buy stock like this, and it's a mistake that's very hard to rectify later on. So if we can get it under control nice and early, we can avoid that mistake. Then moving forward, you're going to have a much better time. So the thing that I want to talk about with this Japanese black pine is needle plucking. So we know that we needle pluck on pines to distribute the energy on the tree. If we let the top of the tree get too strong, then we start to lose the bottom of the tree. Now, why this is important? With this particular tree here, this is going to be grown as a shohin tree. So basically, our tree is going to be down here. We're not going to have, all this stuff that's up here. This is not in the future of our tree. This is just on here to help grow the tree, thicken it, and develop it. But our shohin tree is really going to live down within this section. Now, we want to needle pluck because if we let this sacrifice branch that we've got here, if we let this get really strong, we're going to lose the bottom part of this tree. And this is really what we want to keep. So we don't want to do that. So we want to balance that out. So normally what we do is we try to match the needles up here to the needles down here. And it's a rough count. You don't sit there and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sets, anything like that, because you'll be there forever. But you basically just eyeball and say, okay, well, that's roughly how many needles we've got here in this bottom part of the tree that we're trying to develop. And this is roughly what we've got at the top. The mistake that people make is they end up doing, so let's just pretend this top part of the tree here, okay, this is a branch. Let's just say, pretend for a minute this is not part of the trunk. So when people needle pluck, what I often see is this kind of thing, where they've needle plucked bare, and then out on the tips, they've left all the needles. Now, where I've done this up here, I've actually done this for a very specific reason, which I will tell you about in a second. But essentially this here, if this was on a tree and this was a branch, what you're going to end up with is leggy branches because all the energy is going to be out at the tips. And getting back budding back down here is not impossible, but it's harder. And this is where you're going to want the back budding. So the reason that I've done this up here is because I want to needle pluck to make sure that the needles up here don't overpower down here, so I can keep this nice and healthy down here, but I can still have my sacrifice branch on. So what I can do is make all this bare here, here, and here, and it doesn't matter because I don't want buds here anyway, so I really don't care. All I'm trying to do is just reduce the amount of needles, so I've got a little tuft of needles here, a little tuft of needles here, and a little bit up the top here. But as you can see down here, in the area that I want to keep, I've actually got the needles all the way up the trunk line, all the way up. Now, the reason for this is because I actually do want back budding here. And on a Japanese black pine, you're much more likely to get a bud from a needle site. So wherever you've got a needle, you're much more likely to get a bud from that location. Now, what this allows us to do in some cases is pick where we might want a bud to come out. Now, out in the nursery, it's too big to bring into the studio here, but I've got a Nishiki black pine that we're developing. Now, last year I went through and needle plucked, and I left needles in very specific spots where I wanted buds to come out. And I left more than I need in terms of options. So I left probably 3 or 4 needles in every one location, because I knew that there was a chance that out of those 3 or 4 needles in that location that I may get a bud pop out in one of those needles. Now, it just happens to be on that particular tree that I got a bud in every single needle that I left. So I got 4 or 5 buds in every location where I wanted branching, which is perfect. But for this particular tree, I've left all the needles up here. Now, for this tree here, I'm not going to keep from here to here either. Okay, so at the end of the day, this tree is only going to be from here to here. So really, I want lots of backbudding in this area here. So I've left all these needles there, and I'm not going to pluck these off, because if I pluck these off, then chances are it's going to be really hard to get backbuds in here. But I'm leaving this on here for now just to develop this, so we can get some taper from this to this, because this is quite thick and this is quite thin. So we want to let this keep growing until this catches up to that a little bit. We don't want it to catch right up, because then we're going to lose our taper. I mean, it's never going to really actually catch right up anyway, because this got a head start, but you understand what I'm saying. So now that I've explained that concept on this tree, I want to draw some stuff on the whiteboard for you, just to clarify that even further. But I hope you can see here how I've needle plucked this tree, very bare up here on the sacrificial branch, very full down here on where I want to keep. And the reason for that being is this is where I want all the buds, but at the same time I've also balanced the energy in doing that. So what I'm going to do now is bring the camera in a little bit closer to the whiteboard, and we'll draw some stuff up and try and clarify this for you. Alright, now we're in nice and close to the whiteboard. Let's draw a couple of examples for this for you. So let's say that we've got a pine branch here, okay, and we're looking at this from the side. This is the side view of the branch. So we're going to have needles that are going to be traveling up the side like this. We're going to have needles on top. We're going to have needles on the bottom. And we'll also have needles on the opposite side as well. So pines grow around in a whorl pattern, same like with their buds and their needles and everything like that. So you're going to have them all the way around. Now, if you haven't seen our pine video, go back and watch that so you can learn about needle plucking and why we do it and all that kind of stuff. But if we were going to needle pluck this branch, one of the first things that we want to do, if we're looking to remove needles, the first thing that I always do is, and let me just get my eraser here. First thing I always do is on a branch like this, if we're looking from the side, I remove the needles from the bottom and I remove the needles from the top. And leave all our lateral needles across the side. Because remember when we spoke about before, we're more likely to get a bud from a needle. So we want to leave these needles on the side, because if we are going to get a bud and we've got more chance of getting it out of the needle, well, if we leave them across the sides, then we've got more chance of actually getting lateral buds. So side to side rather than up and down. We don't want up and down branches, we want side to side branches. So if we remove all the needles from the top and the bottom first, we've already removed a good amount of our needles, and we've kept needles where we want them. So we've got a win-win situation happening. But there's another example, is say we have our tree here, and we've got our first branch here, and then we've got our branch up here. Now there's situations where this branch up here has grown thicker. So now we need this one to catch up. So what we're going to do is keep this one cut back, but we're going to allow this one to really grow out nice and long until it thickens up at the base here. And what we're going to end up with is pretty much needles the whole way down this. All the way down this branch. Now, in the process of our needle plucking throughout the year, what we don't want to do is come through and needle pluck this in here like this and just leave a plethora of needles out at the end. And this is pretty much what I see people do all the time. And what you've got to realize is you're letting this branch grow out to get thickness, but eventually you're going to want to cut back to this section. And what are you going to want in this section? Is buds to cut back to. And not only buds to cut back to, but when you're cutting back to buds on Japanese black pine, they need to be strong buds. So you don't want just tiny little buds all over the branch just popping out and just opening up, because if you cut back to those buds, chances are they're not going to be strong enough to pull the sap up into the branch and keep it alive. So you're going to need some significant buds growing in this section before you can cut back to it. And chances are is if you've got all your foliage out here on the tip, or all your needles out there on the tip, then the chances of getting those buds right in nice and close to the trunk where you want to cut back to and having those buds grow strong and healthy is going to be slim. Okay, so this is just going to up your chances of getting those buds back in there. So like we spoke about before, if you were growing this branch out to thicken it up, well, you would leave your needles all along the side here, and you would pluck off the top and the bottom. So you leave those lateral needles. And then chances are all these ones at the base here are all going to get buds. They're going to grow strong. Eventually, you can come back in, cut back to that section, and then these buds will grow on, and you can start your ramification from there. And this is also important too, is when we're developing black pine and it comes time to cutting back and starting that ramification, you don't want to start that ramification too far away from the tree. So let's just take this branch up here, for example. So we've got this branch out here like this. Now we don't want to be starting our ramification, say, from here. So we go to 2 there, and then we go to 4, and then we go to 8, because you can see what happens if we start our ramification here, because we didn't do that work that I just explained. So we had no buds back in here, so our first buds to start from were from here, and now we're starting our ramification and we're getting further and further away from the tree. And what does that give us? It gives us a leggy design and a leggy tree. So say we've got this same branch here. We did that work that I just explained. We've got buds up here and up here. They grow out to be strong. We start our ramification. So we've got 2. Then we go to 4. Then we go to 8. And now we've got a much tighter design into the tree because we had the buds in nice and close. So this is why I wanted to explain it to you, because oftentimes I have people come to the nursery, or they email me online or on Instagram, Facebook, all those kind of stuff, and they say, I've got this black pine, but the branches are super leggy and I don't know how to design it and, you know, get that compact look that they see in like Japan or even in some of the bigger shows around the world. Well, this is exactly how they accomplish that. And if you do have a black pine that's got that really long leggy branch, well then this is essentially probably what's happened. It's been needle plucked. All those needles are being left out at the end of the branch. Now it's hard to get back budding in closer to the trunk. So you're left with these really long branches, and the only way to get them really close is to spaghetti them. Really twist them up and pull them in really tight. And a lot of the times that doesn't look really nice. So if you follow that guide when you're needle plucking, to always keep needles in nice and close to the trunk on your branches, or if you're developing, you've got that sacrificial branch, let's just say. So if we do a quick diagram in the little tree that I had before, so we had this side of the tree that we want to keep, and then we got this side of the tree that's the sacrifice branch. So on this side, we've got tuft of needles there, tuft of needles there, and also some up the top. Okay, I know those top ones that I just drew went out of the frame, but that's okay. But on this side that we want to keep, we have needles the entire way up. Now I know the drawing's not real representative, but 2 things that we've got here is the amount of needles that are in this section roughly match the amount of needles that are in this section. So our energy is distributed evenly. So we're not going to lose this because this is getting too strong. The other thing that we've done is we've removed needles in big gaps up here because we don't want buds here, here or here. We don't want them anywhere there. But we've left all the needles along here because we definitely want buds in this section because that's where we're going to end up making our tree. This part up here is still sacrificed to this, but we're just trying to thicken this up so it can taper to our base. But you can see how all that work has got to come together so that later on, when we start to design the tree, we've actually got something to work with. Like I said, if I needle pluck all this up here and just leave this up here, then we're going to end up with a real leggy tree. We're going to have nothing to cut back to down here. And then our little shohin tree that we want to make out of this section, it's not going to be real good. We're not going to have much to work with. We're going to have a really leggy design. Alright, so that's it for today's video. I hope your key takeaways from this is when you needle pluck, always leave needles in close to where you want your final design. And when you needle pluck, don't just make your branches bare and leave all the needles out at the end. We do need to needle pluck to distribute energy. This is very, very important, but just make sure that you're very precise about where you're leaving needles and where you're taking needles off. My good piece of advice is always take your tops and bottoms of your needles off first because we don't want up and down branches anyway. We always want lateral branches. So leave your side needles, take your tops and bottoms off, and that'll probably get you most of the way home in evening out your needles. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check all our links out down in the description below. You can take one of our online courses, visit our online shop. If you need tools or accessories, we do ship worldwide. You can buy merchandise such as this shirt and the hat. But until next time, enjoy your bonsai journey.